what the heck is a populist anyway? I was watching MSNBC yesterday afternoon, and the Chiron, the words on the bottom of the screen, they're called Chirons because the company that first came up with the technology to do that back 30 years ago was called Chiron. And anyhow, the Chiron read, Populist Fetterman wins Pennsylvania primary. And it got me thinking, I remember, a month ago when the French elections were happening, they were calling Marine Le Pen a populist. And I've seen Donald Trump called a populist over and over and over again in our media, as well as Bernie Sanders. So all of which raises the question, why do they use this single word, populist, to describe this whole spectrum of very different kinds of politicians? Is populist simply shorthand or pop news speak for media friendly? Or for outrageous? I remember they used to call John McCain a populist, or high-profile politicians. Well, it turns out there's actually a definition of the word. In fact, there was a whole book written about it by Cass Mudd. It's called Populism, a very short introduction. And, this expert on this sort of thing says that populism is a person who takes a political position or is part of a movement that reflects the needs and desires of the majority of the population, thus the word populism, and is opposed to the interests of an elite minority. And that opposition to the elite is as much a part of being identified as a populist as is the embrace of what the majority of Americans want. So here you got Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz, a couple of days ago, told a conservative Washington, D.C. newspaper, actually it might have been a month or so ago, he said, I'm a conservative, but I'm also a populist. I am deeply a populist. When it comes to populism, I think the most fundamental and important shift in the last decade in politics is that Republicans have become the party of the working class. Right, so let me get this straight. The guy who votes, along with his entire political party, for trade deals that ship jobs overseas, who votes to raise taxes on working people while cutting taxes on the morbidly rich, who strongly opposes the right of working people to have a union in the workplace, who fights to keep the minimum wage at $7.25 an hour, who is heavily funded by right-wing billionaires and giant multinational corporations, and he supports big employers busting unions. This guy's a populist? There was literally nothing in that list I just read that is supported by the majority of Americans. Literally nothing. Ted Cruz is no populist. But claiming the mantle of populism is pretty much what the Republican Party has been doing ever since the Reagan Revolution. Newt Gingrich, came out and said, yeah, we should always, whenever we refer to Democrats, we should use the word elite. Why? Because to be a populist, you have to be opposed to elites. But the GOP, and no matter how often they want to call Barbara Streisand an elite, as if she were some sort of right-wing billionaire like Charles Koch, doesn't make it so, right? Or Jeff Bezos or whatever. Ain't so. The Republican Party is almost exclusively funded by giant corporations, foreign governments, and the morbidly rich. I mean, it doesn't get any more elite than that. So we need to, stop using the word populist to describe any Republican politician until or unless they've renounced their party or the positions of their party. I mean, you've got a bunch of Republicans who pretend to have done that. Trump pretended to be a populist in the 2015 Republican primary when he called out Republicans during the debate and said that every single one of them wanted to end Social Security and Medicare. That's a populist position to be opposed to ending Social Security and Medicare. He said that all of the Republicans on the stage wanted to cut taxes on the rich, an elite position. He said that they want to suck up to giant corporations by keeping pay low, keep a steady stream of imports from China coming. He even pretended to walk the talk briefly by raising tariffs on a few random products coming out of China. But his populism, when he actually became president, was just as phony as Ted Cruz's. I mean, he borrowed over $2 trillion from the U.S. Treasury and handed it over to himself and his fellow billionaires while using the Defense Production Act to force workers, low-wage workers, back into meatpacking plants during a deadly pandemic at the barrel of a gun. But there is a lot of real populism in America's history. Teddy Roosevelt was our first populist president in 1901. He was followed by his cousin Franklin Roosevelt as our nation's second populist president. FDR was reelected 3 times. He was president 4 different times because he did the will of the people. Harry Truman followed him, but Harry Truman didn't have that populist thing going because he started an unpopular war, the war in Korea. Then came Eisenhower, Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was a populist. He kept taxes on the rich at 91%. The majority of the population loved that. He continued FDR's work on the New Deal. He supported labor unions. He built a modern America for the middle class. This is Republican Dwight Eisenhower, the populist. Michael Hiltzik notes in his book on the New Deal that just one of those New Deal programs that FDR had started, that Eisenhower continued, quote, produced, among many other projects, 1,000 miles of new and rebuilt airport runways, 651,000 miles of highway, 124,000 bridges, 8,000 parks, 18,000 playgrounds and athletic fields, 84,000 miles of drainage pipes, 69,000 highway light standards, 125,000 public buildings built, rebuilt, or expanded, and 41,300 schools. Eisenhower went on to add an additional 47,856 miles of freeway. I think you could argue that John Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, Jerry Ford, Jimmy Carter, they were all populists because they were all governing, basically doing what the majority of the people of America wanted. It all changed, though, when Reagan came into office and started promoting this lie. He pretended he was a populist. By the way, all those presidents I just named, Nixon, I had Nixon and LBJ in that list. The 2 places where they failed on being populist was the Vietnam War, and they both suffered for it. So anyhow, along comes Reagan, and Reagan says, "Oh yeah, I'm a populist too. I'm going to strengthen the middle class by giving tax cuts to the job creators so they'll create more jobs. Trickle down economics, supply side economics. That's the thing." But it was a lie. And ever since Reagan, anytime a Republican tries to pretend they're a populist, they're lying. What the Republicans are actually promoting, when you seriously look at it, is a system of government that merges state and government interests while holding political power by demonizing minorities and foreigners and the powerless. That is literally the dictionary definition of fascism. Republicans aren't populists, they're fascists. Now, on the Democratic side, we've got a problem, too. You got people like, here in Oregon, Kurt Schrader, who voted to blow up Joe Biden's Build Back Better and voted to block Medicare from negotiating drug prices. And he's a Democrat. He's clearly not a populist. He's not doing what the majority of people want. So what is he? I call him a sellout. I don't think Kurt Schrader's a fascist, but I think he's a sellout. If you look at the genuine populists in the Democratic Party, which is the Congressional Progressive Caucus, people like Ro Khanna and Mark Pocan and Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal and Elizabeth Warren, they all want this list. This list of things. These are all things that are supported by more than half of Americans. Accessible, low-cost health care for all, free or low-cost college and trade school, modern, well-funded public schools, expanded Medicare and Medicaid, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, higher wages and the right to unionize, comprehensive immigration reform, tight regulation of banks and insurance companies, getting money and other forms of bribery out of politics, returning to Hamilton's American plan to bring our factories back home, paying for American renewal by appropriately taxing the morbidly rich, breaking up corporate monopolies that rip us off and give us terrible service, and ending corporate personhood and returning those rights to the people. Those are populist positions. Where the hell did this word centrist come from? What makes Kurt Schrader a centrist? He's a sellout. So let's just be clear about this. We can simplify our language tremendously. You have populists, they're, a good chunk, probably about half of the Democratic Party, maybe more, and it's growing. You have sellouts, there's some of them in the Democratic Party. And you have fascists, which the Republican Party is well populated by. Let's all encourage the media to start telling the truth about what's going on, eh?